Okay, so here we are. We're in our September already. Barn Box can't ever get over how quickly it all evolves. And so this month we have Bluefaced Leicester, or BFL. If you've ever knit with yarn that's named BFL and you didn't know what it stood for, it stands for Bluefaced Leicester, which is it's a heritage wool, meaning that it is it's an old breed, fairly old breed, but allowed to evolve in its natural colors and with a more or less natural husbandry, but with some selective improvements made by the people who raise the sheep. So the breed itself is a large English sheep breed. Ewes weigh between 150 and 200 pounds, and rams weigh up to 300 pounds. So it belongs to that family of really large sheep that we've done a few other breeds that are similar. And actually, the Bluefaced Leicester is related to several of the breeds that we've covered before. So I'm excited to talk about that a little bit. So their body type is long and wide, with well-muscled with the back quarter especially large and well-muscled, for making for good cuts of meat. They're highly prized for their lamb meat, but also they develop well into an older mutton grade meat. And although they are a large breed, they are they have a sweet disposition and are easy to handle despite their large size. They have a prominent kind of Roman nose, bright eyes, and kind of slender, erect ears that are long. So they have those really upright ears like the Cheviot sheep have. And they get their name from a deeply pigmented bluish gray skin underneath their coat. So even the white sheep have a dark skin underneath. And that question came up, I think maybe Sally or somebody asked like several months back, can the skin be dark even when the wool is white? Or maybe it was Julie. Yes, and especially in a breed like this. And they get that from their ancestry, which comes from, and I'll get into this in more detail, but which comes from the Wensleydale breed that we studied during our mystery wool along. So both sexes are naturally polled or hornless, and they have fleece-free legs, bellies, and faces. So their faces are not, shaggy. They're very clean cut. They have kind of a long neck and a, kind of a regal stature and gait. And they exhibit a tight flocking instinct, meaning that they work well in a group, and they stick to their flock, and they get used to doing kind of everything as a group. So, that benefits them. And when you think about it, a large size sheep is not able to just scamper away when a predator is near. So having a good flocking instinct helps to protect them in that way. This first one is a picture of the face. This is a white, cream white Bluefaced Leicester, but you can see right here how they get their name. They have literally like a bluish face. And the Roman nose, they have this nose that slopes down from the forehead. The muzzle is fairly broad, and they have good mouth and teeth for grazing. Although they are not a sheep that grazes on just anything. And again, I'll talk about that in a minute. Let me see if I can bring up a picture of the whole body. Let's see, here they are. Here are a couple of them where you can see kind of the whole body. So they have, you can see the clean legs and the clean head all the way down into the, almost down into the shoulders. And then the fleeces. The fleece is open and shaggy and kind of flowy, much like, again, the Wensleydale or the Gotland sheep that we looked at before. They don't have that really tightly crimped, super fluffy fleece. And because they are a long wool breed, so they're the fiber that they produce is not highly crimped. It's longer and silkier, and they are, what they're really known for is the shininess, the sheen of their fibers. So the luster, they are a long luster wool, and their fleeces can grow to a length of, the longest length is about 6 to 7 inches. Although I feel like I have bought spinning fiber that was sheared at an even longer length. It's probably optimal to shear at 6 inches or less for hand spinning, and definitely less for mill spinning. As we've talked about before, most mills want fiber that is 4 inches or less, or 5 inches or less at the most. 6-inch fiber starts to get, tangled in the machinery and slips and things like that. So BFLs are not the typical, although their ancestry comes from a homesteading type of sheep, a small, meaning that farms that have smaller flocks, not range raised sheep that are raised in the thousands, but small holding farms that have 100 to 300 sheep that they're managing at once. And usually with a small holding, a large sheep isn't practical because they, for instance, a Romney sheep can end up being harder to manage because of their size and their energy level. But the BFL is a more docile, friendly, and even trainable sheep. So while you wouldn't necessarily think of them as a homesteading sheep like a Shetland or an Icelandic or a Black Welsh Mountain, something like that, or even a Frisian sheep. We've talked about how Frisians are easy to manage for a small farm. These sheep can be raised on a smaller farm. They're smaller breeds tend to the smaller mountain breeds like the Shetland, the Icelandic, etc. They're known for their ruggedness and their ability to survive and take care of themselves outdoors and to thrive on poor pastures. The BFL actually, because of its size and because throughout its history, the focus of raising it has been on producing beautiful wool in addition to meat. They really require more lush pastures and high quality, well-drained soil to graze on. Their fleece, again, is open and flowing and single coated, so that exposes their skin to sunburn as well, and they need, that means that they require adequate shelter at all times. So they need an ability to go in and out of some kind of sheepfold or barn, or they need trees to flock under, when it's hot and sunny. But again, they have very sweet personalities. Even the rams are very easy to handle, and the ewes can be especially affectionate. They like to be kind of petted and cuddled, and will give back like sheepy greetings, and they're fun. Some of them are, they'll come, they'll come right up to you for a treat or a scratch behind the ears or under the chin. They're kind of like dogs that way. um, and some of them are so highly food motivated that they can be trained to come when called. So that's a very, if you're handling large sheep on a small farm, that's a very useful characteristic and personality trait. They're also relatively easy to halter train for procedures like hoof trimming and shearing and veterinary care. So that makes, again, that just makes it a lot easier on farmers to choose this type of sheep, even for a small homestead. The BFL is a seasonal breeder, and mating typically begins in September or October. The gestation period is 147 days, so approximately 5.5 months. I think that's what that comes out. No, about 5 months. And they generally produce 1 or 2 lambs per year, although many farms report production of up to 250%. So they're fairly prolific, good mothers. They produce plenty of milk to dispense to multiple lambs, and it doesn't harm, it doesn't harm their bodies to produce that many lambs pretty much every year. They have, they're known for high fertility rates, and let's see. And the rams are easy to manage for both natural and artificial insemination. So it's easy to draw semen from them, but also, what a lot of farms do, if they, when it's mating season, they bring in, if they don't have rams that they want to cross, they bring in rams from other farms that have characteristics that they like, that they want in their flock, and to mate with the ewes in their flock. And this is also a really good way to keep the genetic pool active and varied, so that you don't end up with a lot of inbreeding. Another factoid about them is that they are highly resistant to disease, especially scrapie. In fact, in the UK, there is no known instance of scrapie among bluefaced Leicesters. So because of that genetic resistance, they are sought after as crossing sheep to keep some of the mountain breeds healthy. So some of those mountain breeds are especially kind of prone to that disease. It's like a skin disease that causes the hair and the coat to fall out, and eventually will kill a sheep. And so it's always desirable to keep that tendency down in your flock, because I believe it spreads from one sheep to another fairly easily as well. So initially the purpose of this breed was to produce a sheep that would be really a good sire. So initially the goal was to produce rams that were healthy, robust, and had lots of great characteristics to cross on other types of sheep, to again keep the gene pool active and pass on traits that were positive. So within the UK, where the breed originated, they were regularly crossed on top of the Swaledale, the Blackface, Welsh Mountain, Cheviots, many of those kind of native breeds that to produce what they call a mule, a crossbred mule, which is a crossbred mule is a ewe that has a sire that's a purebred Bluefaced Leicester. And the mule sheep is the most popular widespread sheep raised in the UK, for all the reasons I just mentioned, healthy constitution, good wool production, good meat production, large body, all of those positive traits that the Bluefaced Leicester can bring into a flock. Let's see. But as it became established as a breed, it proved itself to be a truly multi-purpose sheep in its own right. In addition to the meat and the wool, they are used for conservation grazing and they're very effective at managing vegetation in areas that can be difficult to access, such as hillsides and wetlands, as long as those areas are producing kind of lush, grassy fodder. So nowadays, or I should say, really since their beginning, the Bluefaced Leicester are primarily raised for their meat, which is lean and flavorful. Again, they produce an excellent lamb cuts, but can be developed further into more mature mutton cuts that are still really tasty and sell well on the meat market. But as it happens, their wool is also continued to be, even with the breeding away from their ancestry, the wool that they produce is highly valued by throughout the wool industry, but also by hand spinners and hand knitters and crocheters as well. I would say as a standalone wool, it's probably best known in the craft market. So you wouldn't buy, you will see sweaters and garments that advertise themselves as being merino yarn, but you wouldn't on the commercial market necessarily see garments that are advertised as Bluefaced Leicester, even though as a wool, it is very soft and very easy to wear next to the skin. It has a really nice hand and beautiful drape, and but it's not. But the wool itself, unless it ends up in the craft market, would end up in a wool pool or some kind of co-op situation where it's blended with other fibers. So let's see. And I'll get into more about the wool a little bit later as well. It doesn't, I just want to say one other thing. The wool doesn't, in a blend, the wool doesn't necessarily stand out the way merino might or mohair might. It does tend to blend in with other fibers and not be as identifiable, I guess. And that's why its beauty is most appreciated in the craft market, in finished yarns and weaving supplies and hand spinning supplies and the like. So backing up a little bit into the history, we've talked before about kind of tectonic shifts in the wool industry that caused such and such a thing to happen. One that we kind of dived into quite a bit occurred during the Industrial Revolution when we talked about the Polworth sheep, and we talked about how much wool was suddenly needed over a very short period of time, and that produced and that meant that the wool industry needed to make changes and develop breeds fairly quickly to keep up with that. The Bluefaced Leicester and the ancestors of the Bluefaced Leicester kind of fell prey to a similar shift in the wool and fiber industry, but much earlier in time. So in medieval Europe, um, all sheep were valued for both meat and wool, but the wool industry itself was smaller and more localized um and much more highly regulated by the guilds, by the medieval guilds. So if you were a wool trader of any kind, so let's say you produced woven goods or stockings or fabrics for the home, or felts, you would be in a group of people that were allowed to buy and sell wool. And there would be brokers, et cetera, allowed to do that. If you were a tanner that used sheepskin for your product to make, say, shoes or gloves or leather vests or whatever, you were not allowed to buy and sell wool. You could buy and sell skins, but not the wool. And so everything was very strictly organized according to the guilds. And that kept the value of wool high. And the and the and in England pretty much had a stronghold on European wool trade because they produced the most wool. Wool was produced in other places, but the British really had it, you know, they had an organized hierarchical system for producing, disseminating, and using wool, so that it was kind of strictly regulated throughout every step. So they were the primary wool producing source in Western Europe, and the long staple wool, which they produced a lot of, or long wools, was highly desirable for durable fabrics and for clothing and household goods of all kinds. England was well known for the high quality of wool that it produced, and the various long breeds that they were both famous for and really good at raising were thought to be descendants of sheep imported by the Romans during their rule of the British Isles in the 1st century AD. So the lineages of their flocks went way back to the earliest days of herding sheep. And in fact, some of their it's known that sheep existed in the British Isles even before the Roman times, well before the Roman times. But as the Middle Ages kind of began to wind down, their status as a top wool producer began to decline when Spain, using sheep imported from Africa, began developing the Merino breed. So the rise of the Merino breed in Spain and Spain's absolute lockdown on Merino products really caused a conundrum for the British wool producers. Slowly, Spain began to replace England as a primary producer of wool, the merino wool being softer and new and desirable, and merino began to be regarded as kind of the superior wool, even though it has its faults, and we need long wools to kind of balance. You can't have everything merino. It's not as hard wearing, for instance, just to name one thing. So without access to with without the ability to import merinos of their own, British wool producers were kind of, up the creek as far as what to do to keep their own wool industry alive and active. And remember, this was the end of the Middle Ages, so you're in the 1700s, and the Industrial Revolution has not begun yet, so that immense market for wool hasn't opened up yet. You're still dealing with small localized wool markets. Even in Europe, even if you're marketing across Europe, that's still a fairly small market, considering the rest of the world. So as a solution, the English sheep breeders decided to shift away from raising sheep primarily for wool to raising sheep primarily for meat. So that trend kind of peaked during the 1700s, and dual breeds that could produce good quantities of both meat and wool were the most valuable, and they maintained their value. English farmers still produce large quantities of wool that never really, the demand for English wool never completely disappeared. It just wasn't as lucrative and as sustaining as it had been. So the reason for that is that the reason they were able to survive at all as a wool producing population is that the lockdown on merino allowed Spain to keep prices of merino really high, and it just wasn't affordable for everyone. And again, the very localized markets meant that there were plenty of people in England and other parts of Europe that were happy to stick with the long wools that they had access to more readily. And probably during that time, it began to be, it was realized that these are just different types of wool that have different purposes, and the cost of merino isn't justified if it's not going to be the right wool for the purpose that you're using it for. Oh, Cece, I love that. You're smelling your wool. It's very sheepy. Okay, sorry, I noticed she was like sniffing her wool. So while the English long wool breeds were desirable for their wool, they did not at the time produce large quantities of meat. They tended to be the smaller, more the Shetland, again, Swaledale, the Welsh Black Mountain. They're smaller kind of hill type sheep. The wools are long and sturdy, but the carcasses of these sheep are small. The meat can be very tasty, but you're just not going to get very much of it. So English farmers, we're looking for ways to produce more meat on the same, animal. And enter at that time a man called Robert Blakewell. He was from Dishley, Leicestershire, and he really began to revolutionize sheep breeding. He was the first to improve sheep and cattle for meat production through methodical selective breeding, meaning that he would inbreed for desirable traits and cull his flocks, take out lambs that did not have desirable traits, so that he could slowly and not so slowly improve his overall results with larger carcasses, larger sheep, and in some cases even better wool. We've talked about this before with many of the modern breeds are are developed for these reasons. Nowadays, it's more scientifically done, but in those days, it was a whole new way of looking at breeding. Instead of just allowing your flock to, breed and, kind of observe, oh, we'll just put the best sheep together. This was like particular methodical breeding. And it was all new. In fact, his methods even inspired Charles Darwin to develop his theory of natural selection. And to expand it. So he was highly instrumental person in the mid to late 1700s to really bring a whole new way of looking at breeding and working with animals to improve their characteristics. His methods worked so well with his own sheep that other farmers quickly caught on and wanted to learn about his methods. And he pretty much spent the rest of his life working with farmers, teaching them the different, how to develop a breeding program and how to work methodically with your flock to improve it. So this is basically the introduction of artificial selection, rather than just a completely natural selection. So using English sheep, Robert Blakewell developed two breeds of big long-wooled sheep, the Lincoln Longwool and the Dishley Leicester. And we've talked before about how Lincolns are, their genetics are so robust and assertive that they often are the crossbreed solution when you want to improve your sheep flock for a variety of reasons, not just size, but the quality of their wool, the size of the fleece, the resistance to disease, the really good set of genes that they carry is highly desirable for crossing to this day. And he is the person who brought that breed to realization. And the Dishley Leicester, and if the Dishley Leicester sounds familiar, and it might not, it's okay if it doesn't, but the Dishley Leicester, a particular Dishley Leicester, was the original sheep of the Wensleydale breed that we talked about a couple of during our mystery wool along. I don't know how much you remember, but that was the breed that could be traced all the way back to one ram, and that ram was the Dishley Leicester that started the whole thing. And so, this is a very influential person who really had a huge impact on the wool producing industry, or the fiber industry, from the late 1700s onward. Two of his students decided to try their hand at developing a new breed, and from those breeds, from their experiments came the Border Leicester. So now we have several different Leicester sheep, and for those who aren't super familiar with the different breeds, the Leicester breeds are all, I shouldn't say all, but several of the famous Leicester breeds are long wool sheep that occur in a variety of colors. They have long, silky, open fleeces, really nice wool, even though it's long and they're a little coarser than a merino. It's still very silky wool and able to be worn next to the skin with a beautiful luster and drape. And these Leicester breeds will bring those traits when they are crossed into the more merino type breeds. So, for instance, the Polworth was originally a cross of the merino and the border Leicester sheep, and the some of the hill breeds, the I'm sorry, I'm lost my word that I was going to say, but the Oxford and the Dorset, those breeds also have some influence from these long wool breeds that loosen the tendency of the fleece to be really tightly crimped and kind of like a solid block, and kind of loosen it up and give it some drape and add some springiness to that fiber that's a little bit different than the really tightly wound super soft merino fleece. So with Robert Blakewell's really revolutionary techniques, sheep breeding developed quickly throughout the Western Hemisphere with an explosion of breeds quickly entering the industry. Um, and this really coincided with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, which in itself advanced so quickly, changed everything about the way people, especially Europeans and by extension Americans, were using wool and producing wool. That the Industrial Revolution created a much larger consumer market, and wool was there just was never enough wool for a certain period of time, about 50 years. The wool industry just almost couldn't keep up with it. So these techniques came just at the right time to springboard the sheep industry into kind of a renaissance of producing sturdy, medium soft wools that could be used in a variety of applications, and used on machinery and woven and spun mechanically, so that to satisfy that commercial market. So this all really came together nicely as a historical evolution, I guess. Fast forward to the late 1800s, that the Bluefaced Leicester emerged as an entirely new breed. And this breed evolved near Hexham in the county of Northumberland during the early it emerged in the late 1800s, but was developed during the early 1900s. BFLs are direct descendants of Blakewell's improved Dishley Leicester, bred from border Leicester sheep selected for the blue face and black skin, and also some influence from Wensleydales. So that dark skin comes from the border Leicester family and the Wensleydale family, and the fleece quality comes from the Dishley Leicester, as well as the large body and the good meat producing characteristics. So breeding the dark skinned border Leicester, while they are a large long wool, they actually do have a fine silky fleece. It's funny because when I started hand spinning, we have a lot of the border Leicester is a popular sheep locally here, but the wool quality is not great it tends not to be very good in this area, because a lot of people just have they have what they call border Leicester flocks, but they're crossbred with all kinds of other long wool sheep like Icelandics, and I'm trying to think. Anyway, the wool quality isn't always as great. And so I always had this opinion of border Leicester that it wasn't really that great. But since and reading about it, I realized that I just haven't met the right border Leicester fleeces. They can be exceptionally fine and silky, and they come in a huge variety of colors, from very dark black brown to white and silver and tans and browns, just beautiful variety of colors. So the fine wool border Leicesters were bred with a variety of other English sheep, including the blue skin Wensleydales. And so the Bluefaced Leicester is kind of a product of all of those selective breeding, experiments. And it actually has, its origins in several of our breeds that we've studied before, which is pretty cool. Let's see. So the Bluefaced Leicester became quite popular quickly, beyond their potential to improve other sheep flocks. Their fleeces have long, lustrous locks and soft wool, so that kept them in a very desirable place in the sheep industry. And by the 1960s, so we're fast forwarding again a little bit, the Bluefaced Leicester was so popular in England that farmers established a sheep breeding association around the breed, and their first flock book was published in 1964. And then in the 70s, the Bluefaced Leicester arrived in Canada, and by the early 1980s, it was imported into the United States by way of Nova Scotia. So while the majority of Bluefaced Leicesters are still found in the UK today, they are spreading throughout North America and gaining popularity here. And the 1980s isn't that all that recent. I mean, it's now 40 years ago, and as we know from previous talks, 40 years is like 10 generations or more of sheep. So it's a lot. There's plenty of room there to grow the numbers in our United States. And other places where Bluefaced Leicesters have been imported and become popular are Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. When we talked about the Polwarth sheep and the development, and this is a more modern thing, but the development of the modern colored Polwarth sheep, the Border Leicester has played a big part in contributing color traits to the Polwarth breed. And you remember Wendy? We talked about Wendy and her dedication to creating and improving and multiplying colored Polwarth in Australia and New Zealand. That was her kind of contribution, was, her light bulb moment was, let's bring in Border Leicester genes and see what happens. And she got an array of beautiful colors among the Polwarth sheep that way. Okay, the wool. So BFL fleeces are, again, long and open. They're a pearled fleece, meaning the locks are pearled, meaning that they develop these kind of bumpy, curly shapes that make them fall into little ringlets all over the sheep's body. And the locks are soft and they really do just have incredible luster, even more than I think the Wensleydale does. They're easy to spin. they take dye well, and they occur in a variety of shades, from white to this kind of taupey brown that was our club, our choice for our club selection. Darker browns and gray, silver grays, even like a black brown color. And I have so this is the color that and this is the color I've always been most familiar with the BFL. And I've spun numerous pounds of this in the past. I even made I spun a sweater quantity of this color to make the first Renee sweater for David. But the other colors in the range that we have accessible to us are, this is the lead belly, the darker brown. It's kind of a spicy golden brown. It's really beautiful. It's not just a darker version of this. It is its own unique brown. And then this is the cream. It's kind of a medium bright white. It's not yellowy at all. Oh my God, the cream is so soft. I mean, they're all soft, but the cream is just, it's creamy. It's beautiful. This is Etta James. So that's the white. And then this is the silver gray. It's kind of a medium, I would say a medium dark gray, like the tide pool color of, and this is also super soft. This is Billie Holiday. And what I'm hoping is that we can do a silver gray at some point as well, to round out the range. As long as it's popular and sells well, we'll do a fifth color. And if a black brown is available to us, we'll bring that in as well. So the wool is nice and sturdy, but still very fine. The micron count is between 24 and 28. So that's just kissing the merino range on the top end, and going into the lower end of medium fine wools. So it's got a nice, it occupies a nice spot on the range of coarseness. And it's springy, but not springy like the Dorset is. It doesn't have that, the locks, the fiber does not grow in that helical shape that makes like the Dorset so crispy and springy. This has a very gentle crimp that allows it to be silkier and feel drapier. And it allows for a very even spinning. When you look at the yarn, it's just so evenly and consistently spun, even in the 2-ply. So where the Dorset maybe, or even the Polworth in the 2-ply might be a little inconsistent, this is very even. And in knitting with it, I didn't really experience a lot of thick and thin variation in the yarn. It was just smooth and consistent throughout. And part of that is the skill of the miller, but really the fiber itself, the quality and the characteristics of the fiber contribute most to those traits. Again, the fleeces can be spun once a year if you're marketing mostly to the hand spinning and craft market, or twice a year if you're sending your fiber to a mill. And that's all dependent on market demands and the weather and the intended, final fiber product. Longer locks do require on the part of the farmer a more mindful, more vigilant care, because again, the longer the locks are on the sheep, the more susceptible they are to sun damage or environmental damage of any kind. Breakage and weak spots due to lambing or milking, I mean, feeding, and just field dirt and vegetation getting stuck in the fiber. So if you are a producer who wants to produce long locks of wool, you have to kind of watch over your sheep a little more closely. Let's see. Oh, another thing about the fleeces that's kind of interesting is that, and this surprised me, for such a large sheep, the fleece weight is only like 2 to 4 pounds, which is really, I thought, really quite small. Most of those big sheep can produce, you know, almost 10 pounds of fiber at a time. So so they don't have a really, what that says to me is, while their fleeces, while their bodies are large, the fleece is not dense. It's very, you know, you can see skin through the fleece. It's a thinner fleece, which kind of it contributes to the silkiness of the fiber, I think, when there isn't that density. So the fiber doesn't get tangled amongst itself as easily. It's probably a little bit easier to clean and everything. These are just conjectures on my part, but I'm thinking, like, if this was my hair and it was so thick that I couldn't get a comb through it, that it would be like the difference between that and just a regular amount of hair that's easy to comb and easy to keep clean. That said, the fiber does produce a yield of 75% clean fiber after it's washed and processed, which is actually a really high percentage of usable fleece. So where so a 4-pound fleece will yield 3 pounds of usable fiber, which is really good. Again, nearly all blue-faced Leicesters produce white wool, as is common among sheep, because sheep are a commercial, their fleece is a commercial product, and the commercial market demands more white wool. And so over the centuries, we've bred sheep to be, you know, the fleece to be dominant, the white fleece to be dominant. But they do carry recessive black genes, and natural colored lambs do appear, even producing, like I said, a really dark black wool. Some blue-faced Leicesters are patterned, and that is actually not a desirable trait. It's okay if they have speckles on their heads and faces, and, you know, in small areas, small parts of their fleeces are spotted, but actual big patches of different colors is not a desirable trait, and usually bred out quickly if someone is raising these sheep for fiber. Let's see. And then the final thing I have is the, you know, with the influx of blue-faced Leicesters in the USA and the popularity of the breed and the widespread geographical area that the United States has, we do have a sheep breeding association for BFLs here. These breeders are dedicated to the preservation and expansion of the breed in the USA. And actually, there are two predominant organizations. They both are dedicated to preserving and expanding Bluefaced Leicesters conscientiously. That is, as we've talked about before, one of the great things about having associations around a particular breed is that it allows breeders to network, and that ensures that the gene pool of the breed will stay lively and varied and healthy. So this association was founded during an original rescue and preservation work that began in 1995 with just a handful of breeders who purchased and divided two existing North American flocks, one from Nova Scotia and the other from Virginia. And they took on the task of tracing the genetics, the lineage, and the genetics, and crossing the two flocks until new genetics could be obtained and imported. By 1997, they were at a place where they could receive artificial insemination. They could receive semen from England to work on artificial insemination through the Michigan State University, using frozen semen from 3 of the original UK selected sires. So they actually are bringing in semen that can be traced all the way back to, some of the original rams. Then in 1998, they brought in semen from their first colored UK Leicester ram, and that was added to the imported gene pool. So there have been several breeder visits to the UK for the purpose of learning and obtaining bloodline selection and collecting semen to bring back to the United States to continue to improve the pool of genetics within the United States. And so this is all regulated by the USDA. So they have, they can bring in a certain amount each year, and they can expand it by a certain amount each year. So those continual imports will ensure a diverse semen supply for the future generations of BFLs here in the United States. And since 2007, the multiple imports into the United States and Canada have, really established a healthy, larger presence of the breed in North America. So that from that very small number of divided flocks in 1995, which numbered collectively only about 60 animals, by 2008, which is only 13 years later, there were over 305 blue-faced owners on record and 2,000 registered animals and counting. So that was back in 2008. So I know this breed has proliferated even more since then, and it is kind of ubiquitous now. Bluefaced Leicester isn't rare or unobtainable in any way here, and it's actually quite common in the yarns that we have available to us. So any questions or comments or contributions? It's funny, I don't know how many people among us actually, if any, raise sheep or have raised sheep or grew up on a sheep farm or anything like that, but you're welcome to contribute and contradict at any time. Okay, Donna.
I'm looking at the colors that you showed, and the Billie Holiday almost on screen looks like it has a bluish tint to it.
Oh yeah, it's very blue gray. And it's yeah, when you put it next to the white, it really pops. And when you put it next to the brown, you can really see the silver. So
Yeah.
it's very silver gray. And I think the luster contributes to that blueness that you're seeing. But definitely, we've had other grays like the CVM, which was had a little more brown in it. The gray of the fin fiber, the wolf gray, that's definitely a browner gray than this. This is almost like a mohair gray. It's really silvery.
Pretty. And
Yeah.
and was the mill local?
This is our mill in Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So there's I I have to admit, I have forgotten now because we sourced this a year ago, and I've forgotten now if this is. I'm pretty sure it's not British. I'm pretty sure it's American, but I don't know. We don't have the, individual farm information or whether this comes from a collective of farms or not.
There's a farm close to me, Flying Fibers,
Uh-huh.
that does BFL and mixes it with Wensleydale, and it's very nice yarn.
Yeah, they do have really nice yarn. Julie?
I remembered, and I can't remember what breed it was. It was an English breed, and we talked about that they had these flock books, and they brought the sheep in to be assessed.
That was That was when we talked Wensleydale. Yep.
Okay. Do they do that with all sheep breeds? Like, are there BFLs that are like the standard for the breed or judged to be the most pretty or whatever?
That's really what the associations are for. And like I said, this association has a flock book. The British Association has a flock book. The associations vary a lot, as much as the people who belong to them. So with the Wensleydales and some of the other sheep as well, the Polworths were very well documented, and the associations are super strong in keeping people involved. When I researched the Bluefaced Leicester, there isn't that same energy in the association information that I had accessible to me. That doesn't mean that the associations are not lively collections of people, but it just means that they're not documenting, they're not able to keep up with the documentation and the publishing of information about themselves. So but the flock books are really important because that's the network really that I'm talking about if I'm a BFL farmer and I want to bring some fresh genetics into my gene pool, I'm going to go to the flock book of my association to start looking at, lineages. I want to bring in sheep that don't have the same lineage as me. And the flock book gives you all of that. It's just like with dogs, the AKC registration books that have dog registrations going back generations, and you can see who's related to who. The flock books are the same thing. And so some associations close their books. They decide at a certain point, like we have enough registrations, we're not taking any more because we're kind of repeating ourselves or whatever, but you can still read the books and use them for this purpose of finding, you know, finding sheep to breed with. The book it's not just a way to like document who you're, you know, the sheep you have. You can do that yourself, but it is a way to tell other people about the ancestry of your flock so that they can approach you or not about breeding. Okay. Somebody just asked about, this is your first, can you just raise your hand and ask your question out loud if you have a question? Someone asked about the knit along. Someone. Who was that? It popped up on my screen, but only
It
temporarily.
says Sue R. from Southern California on the chat.
And what's the question? For me, it pops up and goes away.
It says, what is the KAL? Are we all making the same pattern, or is it your choice of pattern from the website suggestions? What is our timeline? Project done by the next wool school.
Okay, so the Barn Box knit along takes place in our Ravelry group in the Barn Box threads, and it, as far as I know, it's just knitting with the yarn. You can knit whatever you want, but it's really a place to knit with the Barn Box yarn and discuss. And there's not really a timeline, but I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but people try to knit something with the yarn. People who are knitting with the yarn right away can kind of collectively get together there and discuss and share the projects that they're making and what is working out well for them. Then we also, to make things like completely confusing for new people, we also have at the same time a separate knit along that's a sweater knit along. Our Rhinebeck sweater knit along is going on right now, and that's not necessarily connected to Barn Box, but lots of Barn Box people are in it, so they might actually be knitting with their BFL in the sweater knit along, and discussing, you know, the yarn and the patterns there as well. I hope that makes sense. We do a lot of knitting together, this group. The designs with this yarn, so the hat was the new pattern. Usually I do try to come up with a new pattern for each Barn Box, and this month I designed this cap. So the yarn itself surprised me with how it is a long wool, but it's not wiry in any way. It's very airy and light. So the spinning of it complements that really well. So when you knit with it, I wouldn't call it a bouncy hand. It is squishy because it's so airy, but it's very light. Like this hat is the medium size, and it fits me, but it could stretch to fit someone bigger too. And it's so light. I didn't even use 50 grams of my skein to make this. And it's a, you know, it's a 20-inch head. It would fit a 22-inch head. It has cables and everything, slip stitch. So it's the type of pattern that might use quite a bit of yarn in another fiber type, but it's weightless, and when I fold up the brim, it feels really warm and cozy. I'm looking forward to wearing it when it gets cold. I also, with the leftovers, I started this cowl, and I think I was able to knit up to about here with the leftovers. So still a pretty long cowl. So I didn't make a matching cowl. We're going to release this pattern when we roll out the yarn to everybody, which is maybe this week, I can't remember. Yeah, I think it's this coming week. So this cowl pattern will be available soon. And again, it's the same slip stitch pattern, but I just wanted to show you, they look a little bit different from each other. Can you see it? That the ribbing in this looks different. And that's because this was my personal choice, but when I did the ribbing on this one, the slip stitch ribbing, I did it like a brioche stitch, and it really made the ribbing pop. It probably uses a little more yarn than just a regular slip stitch, but I thought that was a really interesting kind of variation that you could do. If you're familiar with brioche, it's just you do the slip stitch with the yarn over the needle instead of behind the stitch. And then on the next row, you knit that loop together, and it just makes those ribbings balloon out, kind of puff out a little more, and the fabric is slightly more squishy. Anyway, there's a lot of depth in this one. And the next thing I'm going to do with this yarn is with the DK, I'm working on a sweater design for it. So it won't be out next week or anything. But hopefully by the time definitely by the time we get to our January sweater knit along, we'll have that pattern will be available. So I hope you enjoy this yarn. It's really, really, really nice to knit with. I'm really glad we brought this in. When we first got the samples from the mill, we just fell in love with it, and we instantly committed to a range of colors in 2 weights. I mean, I just knew this would be a wonderful addition to our yarn lines, and I'm hoping that everyone else feels the same way, because it's a really worthy, something a little different and very worthy. It's so soft. I would say it's, you know how the Jacob, those who have knit with the Jacob are finding it just so delightful. This is even smoother than that. This is like the Jacob in its airiness and softness, but it's also got a buttery smoothness to it. So if that doesn't, if I haven't made you want it yet. Geeka?
Yeah, a couple of questions. What's the name of the hat, and are the hat and the cowl in the same pattern?
No, the hat is it's the hat that was offered with the barn box pattern. So it's the Toasty Oats cap.
Okay.
And the cowl was not included because I hadn't knit it yet so the cowl is a separate pattern.
Okay.
And it's the Toasty Oats cowl. And the cowl, this is like the long skinny one that you can pull up over your ears, but then the pattern includes a scarf length one that's narrow that you can double up.
Okay.
So
And
that'll be.
Will you include in that your instructions about how to do it sort of brioche style?
I didn't,
Okay.
but I'm just telling you, that's what I started out knitting it the same way as the hat. And then I kept wondering like how I could make that texture kind of, that shape rounder. And that's what I came up with. So that was really my own contribution and experiment, but you guys can try it too. And
okay. And then Sue, who had asked the question, said she doesn't know how to raise her hand. So I'll just say that on mine, I'm on a laptop, and if I bring my cursor down to the bottom of the screen, there's a thing called reactions. And when I hover over that, I can, it lets me raise my hand or lower my hand or do other reactions. So I hope that helps.
thank you. Robin?
Hi, Anne. Would the DK version of this yarn be good for a Kaisa?
Yeah. It would
It
be
could-
lovely.
So soft and
It really is. It's incredible.
and
it would-
that's what I thought, but I wanted to ask what your opinion was.
Yeah, I think it would be really lovely. It's so light
Mhm.
that, you know, a sweater with that kind of volume, you want something light with some nice drapes so that it doesn't end up being a barrel, that it will drape against your body really nicely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And a home office too would be really nice as that. Julie? Julie, you have your hand up?
Okay, sorry. I wasn't sure which Julie because the other Julie had her hand up
Oh.
before.
Sorry.
I am a first-time barn boxer myself. How do we get the patterns that are free patterns that are associated with it? Did I miss it in the email? Because I don't always read it
Yeah,
carefully.
it's your email that you got last week when the barn box came out on the 16th.
Okay.
Has your code for your free pattern. You just put the pattern in your shopping cart, and when you're checking out, you use the code and it will be free.
Thank you.
And for the first time this month, we're opening up we offer a selection of patterns as suggestions that I think will be really nice in this yarn, but you can now download any pattern you want with your barn box code. So if you have other ideas that you think might work, all the better. And all the better for you. Other announcements. So we're getting into the thick of the fall and sweater weather, and oh, I'm sorry, Sally.
What do you think of the fingering for Artist and Anne?
I think you could do that. I think it would be really pretty. The sheen on it would show off the stitch patterns really well. It will be slightly fuzzier than the deco, which is super smooth, but this is pretty. I think it would be really beautiful. And it will have a nice light warmth to it that'll be really nice.
Okay, thank you.
And if you knit that, we're going to want to get pictures of you in it. So
Okay, I think I'm leaning toward that. I've had the Artist and Anne and I have the Kent lace, but I just wasn't sold on the Kent lace for the Artist and Anne.
This will be slightly heavier, so it'll give you a little more fabric, but it'll be a similar kind of finished fabric with a little more shine.
I like the shine idea. Okay.
Yeah. Christy?
Okay.
How would it be for Ivar?
Oh, beautiful. In fact, hang on. I have one here. This is how it would be for Ivar. Barb knit this with the club with the barn box color. You can see, look at the stitch definition on that panel.
That's incredible. That's incredible. But you
It's
know what?
I was wearing it. I was working in the shop all day Friday, and I was cold, so I put it on, and oh my God, it's so comfortable. I forgot I had it on, and I wore it home, which is why it's here.
So,
a little Freudian slip there. I forgot I wore it home.
I ordered a sweater quantity as soon as I got it because it was unbelievable. Forgetting that you can get a 10% off. So is there anything I can do retrospectively?
Yeah, write to David at knitspot.com. I think he can credit you back for that.
Okay. Okay. I was just so eager. I
Good
thought
for
it
you.
was
And you had your house sitting money right there in your pocket.
right, exactly. Uh,
You got yourself a yarn budget now with your house sitting.
yeah, anybody need any house sitting done over here in Bellingham, Washington? I'd go
You'd
as
be
far south as Skagit County.
You'd be surprised. I'm sure you can get many one-story, all one level house sitting jobs
Once.
there.
Yes, that's a requirement.
Will work for yarn.
And your advertisement could say, I have X number of years hurting children experience. I will keep your workers in shape. Oh, anybody else have any questions or want to say anything about our
And,
award?
and somebody asked if the yarn would be good for socks.
BFL is really good for socks. This is a fairly softly spun yarn, so that will, it's not a tight sock yarn, but if you knit it tight enough, it probably would be really nice. I'm sure it would be really warm and feel really nice. Generally for socks, you want something that's spun and plied a little bit tighter than this, just to make the wearability better. But make some socks and let us know. I don't get the feeling this is gonna pill a whole lot. It's really nice. The sweater fabric is especially beautiful. All right, we're nearing the end of September. We're heading to Rhinebeck in mid-October, so we will be exhibiting at the New York State Sheep and Wool Show at Rhinebeck on the 20th and 21st, I think, of October. And in Building C, booth number 36, I think. So come and see us. We're in a corner booth. We have a really pretty spot with good lighting, and good friends are going to be there with us. Robin and Julie Fenoglio are coming to work in the booth this year, and of course Michelle and Cindy will be back, and David will be there. So please come and see us at the show and show us your knits. Michelle, she wants to take pictures and get everything, make you a star on social media.
I asked her if because I wear uniforms, right? Scrubs. I'm like, can you stylize us while we're there?
Yeah, she wants to do some photo shoots there with you guys. She wants you to model for her. So, so that's our big thing that we're getting ready for. Plus, and as soon as we get back from Rhinebeck, we'll be it'll be Festivus time, and we'll be rolling out our Festivus card. So I believe you all received a postcard with the Festivus yarn on it. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I think we're going to be rolling that out. We get back from Rhinebeck on a Tuesday. It won't be in the next day's email, I don't think. It'll be in the week after that. So it actually will be closer to the 1st of November. And with the rollout of the Festivus yarns, we'll have an ebook of special patterns by a gang of fun designers, and a knit along that will begin in early November and extend to Christmas time. Plus, all the patterns in the ebook will be available as standalone patterns. And we're just, as always, very, very much looking forward to our Red Scarf. It's a fundraiser, but really it's more of a fundraiser because we all have so much fun getting together and celebrating that time of year with each other. And of course, in November, we have another barn box coming up in November, coinciding with Black Friday, I think this time. And in between Rhinebeck and Red Scarf. I believe Michelle has a special Halloween kit she put together. So her and Barb cooked up something. I don't know very much about it. So there'll be a special kit for that. And then Black Friday we'll have the holiday barn box again this year that we have planned. So lots and lots of fall and winter stuff coming up, and I hope you'll enjoy it all and be with us for it all. And I'm looking forward to being with you too. All right. And with that, I'm gonna sign off and go eat lunch. I'll talk to you guys on Wednesday. Most of you, I'll talk to you on Wednesday.